My neighbor secretly filmed me, framed me as a criminal, and sent CPS to ruin my life. So I finally exposed her and kicked her out of the neighborhood. But now she's out of jail, asking if we can talk. When I moved from the Upper East Side of Manhattan to a poorer part of Brooklyn, I was hoping to get away from the rich people. You know, the ones who think you're disgusting for wearing off-brand Lululemon and skipping a Pilates class. And at first it was worth it. Everyone was extremely friendly, the type of people to offer to babysit your cat as soon as you mentioned going on holiday. I finally felt peaceful, until I met Karen. Yes, her name was actually Karen. Pearl necklace, blonde hair, permanently smelled like vanilla and coconuts. I had the displeasure of having her as my neighbor. The first time I met her was when I brought a plate of homemade cookies to her house. Hey, my name is Charlotte. I was instantly cut off by her grabbing the cookie and holding it up just inches away from her face. She then squinted her eyes and her face contorted like she had bitten into a lemon or something. These were 3 minutes overdone. I'm not effing eating these, she said, before putting the cookie down on the plate and closing the door on me. I swear I thought she was pranking me, but after that we never spoke again. Not directly at least, because she still made sure to nitpick everything. She started off by targeting just me. In just 3 weeks, she had called animal control after my dog barked for 10 minutes at 3 a.m., poured bleach all over my front garden because the weeds were overgrown. And when I was playing music from the inside of my home at 7 p.m. on a Friday, she knocked on my door and handed me a noise complaint flyer that she had typed out herself. Sigh, and I'm the youngest child, so I value peace over standing up for myself, which meant I always gave in to her demands. Luckily, it wasn't long before she started targeting the entire town, and they were nowhere near as passive as me. So when she started throwing out their Amazon packages because they were taking too long to collect it, or trying to destroy the electric wires on those brown wooden poles to disrupt the Wi-Fi so we could all reconnect, they weren't having it. They collectively hosted yard sales in her front garden every Saturday morning for weeks on end, and she would only wake up after it started. So instead of shutting it down and looking like a beach, she was forced to let it happen. After a few weeks of this, she stopped being the neighborhood terrorist and went back to just bullying me, or more specifically, my boutique. You see, I worked a corporate job 4 out of 7 days in the week, and I'm a pretty high-maintenance girly. Shopping sprees, weekly therapy sessions, impulse vacations, you know the drill. So to afford the lifestyle I want, I have to run a nail and hair salon. I've been running it for 3 years and use Instagram to promote it. Licensing was never an issue since most of my clients came from referrals, and I've never had a complaint regarding hygiene or anything like that. But of course, Karen thought differently. The way she saw things, I was bringing down the integrity of the neighborhood community, whatever the F that means. So when she asked me to shut down my business and I refused, she went all out. Except at first it was subtle. Clients started canceling the same day their appointment was booked for. People stopped posting their results on their Instagram story. But when this didn't stop me from shutting down my business, she made a Facebook group with all the moms, including me. It was one of those groups only the admin can type into. She sent photos of the inside of my home that had clearly been taken without my knowledge outside my window. It was during spring cleaning, so my entire kitchen was a mess from rearranging everything. Karen broadcasted to everyone about how I was no different to an illegal substance cartel, and I needed to be stopped. I expected all the moms to leave the group chat and text me with support, but instead, they all unfriended me, and that same week, I didn't get any bookings. Right before this, my business was printing money, so much so that I was ready to quit my corporate job. So this hit hard. I was right about to pound on her door and give her a piece of my mind when I noticed something. Through the window of her home, I saw her adjusting an ankle monitor around her ankle. Interesting. Naturally, like any respectful neighbor, I did some digging. Turns out she was on probation for substance charges, LOL, and one of the terms was no community disruption. I gathered every photo and video I had ever taken of her, every screenshot I could get my paws on, and without missing a beat, I sent them all to her probation officer, LMAO. Apparently, she was such a repeat offender that she ended up being reincarcerated in a matter of a few weeks, with a sentence longer than ever before. But what I didn't anticipate was the jails being overcrowded, and her being let out on good behavior after just 4 weeks in a cell. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured maybe jail had changed her, or at least scared her straight enough to leave me alone. For the first few days after she got back, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Karen wasn't making any noise complaints or throwing out packages. She wasn't even giving me dirty looks when I walked past her house. I should have known something was wrong. One morning, I went to check my mail and found my mailbox completely glued shut. I had to call a locksmith to get it open. The next day, someone anonymously reported my boutique for toxic fumes. A health inspector showed up unannounced while I was doing a client's nails. He didn't find anything wrong, but it was embarrassing and unprofessional. Then I found a note slipped under my door. It just said TikTok in this creepy cutout magazine letter style. I knew it was Karen, but I couldn't prove it. She was being careful this time. I installed a cheap security camera facing my front door, but it didn't seem to deter her. The weird incidents kept happening. My trash cans would be tipped over. My doorbell would ring at 3 a.m. with nobody there. Small things that were annoying, but not quite harassment I could report. Then I noticed one of my regular clients posted a selfie at another salon with the caption, "Back to my old girl, way better anyway." I messaged her asking if everything was okay, and her response chilled me. "Didn't know you were filming us without consent." I had no idea what she was talking about. I never filmed my clients without permission. I sometimes did Instagram lives with clients who agreed to it, but that was it. When I asked for clarification, she sent me a link to a post on a neighborhood Facebook group. Someone had taken clips from my Instagram lives, heavily edited them, and spread a rumor that I secretly recorded all my clients. The post had dozens of comments from people saying they'd never go to my salon again. Some were even threatening to report me. And while the account that posted it was anonymous, I knew exactly who was behind it. Karen had found a way to get revenge without directly violating her probation terms. She was destroying my reputation and my business from the shadows, and there wasn't much I could do about it. One morning, I woke up to find my apartment had been egged all over my windows and door. As I was cleaning it up, I noticed my internet wasn't working. When I called my provider, they said someone had called and canceled my service. I had to pay a reconnection fee and wait 2 days to get back online. That same week, my building manager started sending me notices about noise complaints and lease violations that had never been issues before. When I asked who complained, he just said concerned neighbors, but wouldn't give names. I knew it was all Karen, but I couldn't prove it. She was being careful to stay just on the legal side of harassment. No direct threats, no confrontations, just this constant, low-level sabotage that was slowly driving me insane. I decided I needed more evidence, so I installed another security camera, this one hidden in a planter near my salon door. The very next day, it caught someone in a hoodie pouring something into my planter box. The footage wasn't clear enough to identify the person, but the next morning, I found my front window cracked and 2 clients no-showed their appointments. I was getting desperate. This was beyond petty neighborhood drama. Karen was systematically destroying everything I'd built. I called the police about the window, but they basically shrugged it off as minor vandalism and said they'd keep an eye out. Yeah, super helpful. The officer, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a coffee-stained uniform, barely glanced at the jagged hole in my storefront window before scribbling something in his notepad. His indifference felt like another punch to the gut after everything I'd been through. The next morning, my landlord texted me saying he needed to do a surprise inspection of my apartment. Apparently, someone from the block had sent a formal complaint about unlicensed hazardous waste disposal from my salon. I nearly had a panic attack right there. My hands shook so badly I had to set my phone down on the kitchen counter and take several deep breaths. I keep my place spotless, especially the salon area, but I knew this wasn't about actual violations. It was Karen trying to get me evicted. I spent the entire day deep cleaning everything, even though it was already clean. I scrubbed the baseboards with a toothbrush, reorganized my professional products 3 different times, and even cleaned behind the refrigerator, a task I'd been avoiding since moving in. The sharp smell of cleaning products made my eyes water, but I couldn't stop. When my landlord showed up, he seemed uncomfortable, like he didn't actually want to be there. He was a decent guy, balding, perpetually dressed in the same beige sweater, and always apologetic about raising the rent. He glanced around half-heartedly and said everything looked fine. Before leaving, he mentioned that the complaint came with photos of chemical containers being improperly disposed of. I showed him my professional disposal system for nail products, and he seemed satisfied, but the whole thing left me feeling violated. That night, I discovered someone had created a burner email account using my boutique's name and was sending fake client complaints to local forums and even Yelp. The reviews claimed I'd burned people's scalps with hair dye or given them fungal infections from dirty nail tools. One particularly graphic review described in horrifying detail how I'd allegedly left a woman with chemical burns after a facial. It was all complete bullpoop, but the damage was already done. My phone stayed silent for days. No new bookings. I watched my bank account dwindle as I continued paying rent on both my apartment and the small commercial space I'd converted into my boutique. I was at my lowest point, seriously considering moving again, when I got a text from Kira, my best friend from high school. We'd lost touch over the years, but she'd just moved to Brooklyn for a new job and wanted to reconnect. It felt like the universe was finally throwing me a bone. I remembered how we used to practice doing each other's hair during sleepovers, how she'd been the first person to tell me I had a natural talent for it. We met for coffee at a small cafe 3 blocks from my apartment. The place was cramped but cozy, with mismatched furniture and local artwork covering the walls. It was like no time had passed. Kira was still the same, loud, loyal, and way more confrontational than me. Her dark curly hair was now streaked with purple, and she wore the same confident smile I remembered from our teenage years. When I told her about Karen, she was furious. She immediately booked an appointment for highlights at my salon, saying she wanted to support my business. "This woman sounds like a complete psychopath," she said, stirring her latte aggressively. "And you're just letting her walk all over you?" I sighed, tracing the rim of my coffee cup with my finger. "It's complicated. I tried standing up to her before, and it only made things worse." During her appointment, while I was foiling her hair, Kira confessed something weird. "So, I got this strange DM on Instagram before coming here. Someone claiming to be your former client warned me to stay away from your salon, said you burned her scalp and refused to compensate her." My stomach dropped, and I nearly dropped the foil in my hand. The salon suddenly felt colder, and I could feel sweat forming on my palms despite the chill. Did they say who they were? Nope, just a blank profile with the username TruthTeller718. I ignored it because it seemed sketchy, but thought you should know. After her appointment, Kira and I spent hours tracking down the fake accounts and posts. My small living room became command central, with laptops open on every surface and empty takeout containers piling up as the night wore on. We traced the burner Instagram page to an IP address that matched Karen's house. Not exactly court-admissible evidence, but enough for us to know for sure it was her. "We need to fight back," Kira said, her new highlights gleaming under my salon lights as she paced back and forth across my living room. "You can't just let her destroy your life like this." I was hesitant, twisting a strand of hair around my finger finger nervously. Last time I fought back, she went to jail and came back even worse. Then we need to be smarter this time, Kira insisted, stopping to look me directly in the eyes. Document everything, build a case so solid she can't wiggle out of it. So that's what we did. I invested in better security cameras, ones with clearer night vision and better angles. I installed them discreetly around my apartment and salon, making sure they covered every possible approach. I started keeping a detailed log of every incident, no matter how small. When Karen left a dead plant on my doorstep the next day, real mature, we caught her on tape. The footage showed her smirking as she placed the withered fern by my door, taking a moment to admire her handiwork before walking away. When another anonymous complaint came in about loud music from my apartment while I was literally out of town visiting my parents, we had time-stamped footage proving it was false. But Karen was crafty. She always stayed just far enough away to avoid direct legal trouble. She'd wear hoodies with the hood up when doing anything near my cameras, her face partially obscured but her distinctive gait and mannerisms still recognizable to anyone who knew her. She'd use public computers at the library to post her fake reviews, careful never to use her own devices. She never directly threatened me. Everything was implied or anonymous, creating a web of harassment that was difficult to prove in any single instance. One day, I came home to find a young woman standing in the hallway outside my apartment. She had wavy blonde hair and was dressed in a bohemian-style outfit that looked effortlessly put together. She introduced herself as Lana, my new next-door neighbor. She seemed super sweet, offering me homemade cookies wrapped in cellophane with a little ribbon and complimenting my hair. She mentioned she'd seen my Instagram and was dying to help out at the boutique since she was between jobs. I was desperate for help since clients were slowly starting to return, so I gave her my number and told her to text me if she was serious. Something about her seemed off, but I couldn't place it. Maybe I was just paranoid after everything with Karen. There was an eagerness in her eyes that didn't quite match her casual demeanor, like she was trying too hard to appear relaxed. A few days later, Kira texted me a photo. It showed Lana leaving Karen's house late at night, glancing furtively over her shoulder as she closed the front door behind her. My blood ran cold. Karen had planted a mole right next to me. The realization made me feel sick. I'd invited this woman into my home, shared details about my business, even considered hiring her. I decided to test Lana's loyalty. When she came over for coffee to discuss potentially working together, I casually mentioned that a local reality TV star had booked a full day of services next week. This was completely made up. I didn't even have a specific celebrity in mind. I just wanted to see what would happen. I watched her carefully as I spoke, noting how her eyes widened slightly and how she asked several follow-up questions about which services the star had booked and when they were coming in. 2 days later, an anonymous post appeared on the neighborhood gossip board. Charlotte from that illegal salon is lying about celebrity clients to drum up business. She's telling everyone exact wording I used with Lana to seem legitimate. Don't fall for it. The post was word for word what I'd told Lana. No one else could have leaked it. I finally had proof of Karen's network. The betrayal stung, even though I'd suspected it all along. I'd wanted so badly to believe that someone in the neighborhood was genuinely interested in befriending me. Instead of confronting Lana privately, I decided to take Kira's advice and handle it publicly. The neighborhood was having a summer block party that weekend, and I knew both Lana and Karen would be there. The event was held in the community garden, with string lights hanging from the trees and folding tables covered in potluck dishes. I spent the first hour mingling nervously, waiting for the right moment. During a lull in the conversation, I pulled out my phone and said, "Hey, has anyone seen this weird post about my salon?" I read the gossip board post out loud, then looked directly at Lana and smiled. Funny how that's the exact story I told to only one person in a private conversation in my apartment. The crowd went silent. Everyone turned to look at Lana, whose face had turned bright red. She mumbled something about needing to leave and practically ran away, knocking over a cup of lemonade in her haste. Karen, who was standing by the punch bowl in a floral dress that seemed too cheerful for her personality, looked like she wanted to unaliving me with her eyes. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped her plastic cup, and for a moment I thought she might storm over and confront me. Instead, she slipped away quietly, disappearing into the crowd. After that, Lana never contacted me again. I later heard she moved out within the week, leaving behind rent she'd already paid for the month. Karen had lost her inside source, but that only made her more desperate and dangerous. I felt a momentary triumph that quickly gave way to anxiety about what would come next. The following Tuesday, I was in the middle of a client's gel manicure when there was a knock at my door. The sound made both me and my client jump. I opened it to find two people from Child Protective Services standing there with stern expressions. A woman with a clipboard and a man with a badge, both looking official and unimpressed. They explained they'd received an anonymous tip about a chemically dangerous environment threatening children near my home-based salon. My heart was pounding as I let them in, apologizing to my client who looked confused and uncomfortable. I showed them every product I used, explained my ventilation system, and provided all my permits and documentation. I walked them through my disposal procedures, showing them the special containers I used for chemical waste. They seemed satisfied and even a bit annoyed at what was clearly a false report. Before leaving, one of them, a woman with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair, gave me a knowing look. "Be careful about what enemies you make," she said quietly. "This kind of vindictive reporting wastes our time and resources when there are children who actually need our help." That night, I couldn't sleep. Karen had escalated to involving government agencies. What would be next? Would she call the IRS? Immigration? I felt like I was constantly waiting for the next attack, and it was exhausting. I tossed and turned, checking checking my phone every few minutes, jumping at every sound from the hallway. The constant vigilance was wearing me down physically and emotionally. The next morning, I ran into Marvin, my elderly neighbor who had offered to water my plants when I first moved in. He was a retired professor with thick glasses and a collection of cardigans for every occasion. He noticed I looked stressed and invited me in for tea. His apartment was cluttered but cozy, filled with books and vintage furniture. As we talked, he mentioned that Karen had reported him for having an unsightly bird feeder in his yard. "She's been doing this for years," he said, shaking his head as he poured hot water into delicate porcelain cups. "Before you moved in, she had the last 3 tenants in your apartment driven out within months. That's when I had an idea. Marvin, do you know anyone else in the neighborhood who's had problems with Karen?" He laughed, a warm, rumbling sound that made his shoulders shake. "Honey, who hasn't?" Over the next few days, I started reaching out to neighbors, asking about their experiences with Karen. The stories came pouring in like a dam had broken. She'd reported a family for their children being too loud while playing in their own backyard. The kids were now afraid to play outside. She'd complained about an elderly couple's medical transport vehicle parking improperly when picking them up for appointments, causing them to miss crucial doctor visits. She'd even tried to get a local teacher fired by sending anonymous emails to his school claiming he was hammered in public. He was drinking a root beer at a school fundraiser. As people shared their stories, I realized something important. Karen had been documenting everything. She kept records of when people put their trash out too early, when dogs barked, when Amazon deliveries were left on porches. She took photos and videos to use as evidence in her complaints. Her house was essentially a surveillance center for the entire block, a thought that made my skin crawl. 2 could play at that game. I created a shared digital folder and asked everyone to contribute their documentation of Karen's harassment. Photos, videos, emails, texts, anything they had. Within days, the folder was bursting with evidence spanning years of Karen's reign of terror. There were screenshots of false complaints, videos of her trespassing on properties, emails from various agencies confirming they'd received reports from her. The sheer volume was staggering. Karen had essentially made harassment a full-time job. I compiled it all into a comprehensive dossier and sent it to the head of our neighborhood HOA, along with a formal request for action. I made sure to copy Karen's probation officer as well, though I didn't explicitly ask for her to be reincarcerated. I just wanted the harassment to stop. I spent hours organizing the evidence, creating a timeline that showed the escalating pattern of behavior, and writing a cover letter that was firm but professional. The HOA board reviewed everything and called an emergency meeting within days, much faster than I expected for a neighborhood association. I later learned that several board members had been victims of Karen's harassment themselves and had been looking for a way to address the problem for years. They just needed someone to take the lead and compile all the evidence in one place. The HOA called an emergency closed-door meeting. I was invited to present my evidence, and to my surprise, so were about 15 other neighbors. One by one, we told our stories. The young mother whose children were afraid to play outside, the elderly couple who missed medical appointments, the teacher who almost lost his job. Karen sat in the corner, her face getting redder by the minute, occasionally trying to interject with denials that were quickly shut down. When it was her turn to speak, she claimed we were all conspiring against her because she was the only one who cared about neighborhood standards. The vote was unanimous. Karen was issued formal sanctions through the HOA's bylaws. She would be required to submit any neighborhood complaints in writing to the board for review before any action could be taken. She was also barred from serving on any community committees for 2 years, a significant blow since she'd used those positions to legitimize her complaints in the past. The relief in the room was palpable. People were smiling, some were even hugging each other. It felt like a community healing. I thought that would be the end of it. I really did. I thought maybe she'd finally back off now that the whole neighborhood had united against her. I celebrated that night with Kira, opening a bottle of champagne and allowing myself to believe that the worst was behind me. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up to find my salon window vandalized with red spray paint spelling out "liar" in huge letters. The crimson paint dripped down the glass like blood, visible to anyone walking by. My security camera had captured the whole thing. Karen, not even bothering with a disguise this time, spray painting my window at 3 a.m. with a look of pure rage on her face. She'd spent nearly 5 minutes on the vandalism, carefully forming each letter, occasionally looking around to make sure no one was watching. The calculated nature of it was more disturbing than if it had been done in a moment of passion. This was it. This was my moment. I'd been passive for too long, always taking the high road, always trying to avoid conflict, but enough was enough. Something inside me snapped, not in a violent way, but in a way that felt like finally standing up straight after being hunched over for too long. I posted the security footage on my salon's Instagram with a simple caption, "My neighbor vandalized my boutique again. This time, I'm not staying quiet." I tagged the local community board, the police department, and yes, Karen's probation officer. My hands were shaking as I hit post, but for the first time in months, it wasn't from fear, it was from resolve. The post spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Former clients reached out, offering to book appointments to show support. Neighbors I'd never even met sent flowers and cards. The local hardware store owner offered to help clean the graffiti for free. A community that had been silently suffering under Karen's tyranny was finally finding its voice, and I was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Karen was served with a restraining order the very next day. The officer who delivered it was the same one who had dismissed my vandalism complaint weeks earlier. This time, time, he seemed genuinely apologetic, removing his hat as he explained the situation. "We've had multiple complaints about this woman," he explained, shifting uncomfortably on his feet. "The video evidence makes this an open and shut case of property damage and harassment. With the restraining order in place, Karen couldn't come within 100 feet of me, my apartment, or my business. She couldn't contact me directly or indirectly. She couldn't post about me online or send others to interact with me on her behalf." The legal document felt like a shield, something tangible I could hold on to when the anxiety threatened to overwhelm me again. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. My salon bookings started picking up. I was able to sleep through the night without jumping at every sound. I even started playing music in my apartment again. Not loud, but not whisper quiet either. I began to reclaim the little pieces of my life that fear had stolen from me. 3 weeks later, a for sale sign appeared in front of Karen's house. No warning, no goodbye, no moving truck. She just disappeared. I later heard from Marvin that she'd moved in with her sister in New Jersey. Her house sat empty for months, a silent reminder of the battle we'd fought. The white colonial with its perfectly manicured lawn seemed less intimidating without her presence. Just another house on the block. I decided to use the opportunity to expand my business. With Karen gone and my reputation slowly rebuilding, I invested in better equipment and converted my spare bedroom into a proper waiting area with comfortable chairs and a coffee station. Kira, who had been helping me part-time, suggested we become business partners. She had marketing experience from her corporate job and thought we could turn my small boutique into a full-fledged salon. "You've got the talent," she said one evening as we sat on my fire escape watching the sunset over Brooklyn, "and I've got the business sense. We could be unstoppable." It took time, but we made it happen. We got all the proper permits and licenses, renovated the space to meet commercial standards, and even hired 2 part-time stylists, a colorist who specialized in creative dyes, and a nail technician whose detailed artwork had gained a following on social media. We renamed the business Phoenix Beauty, risen from the ashes of Karen's attempts to destroy it. The new sign above the door, with its elegant gold lettering, felt like a declaration of victory. The day we held our grand reopening, nearly the entire neighborhood showed up. People brought champagne and flowers. Marvin made a speech about community resilience that brought tears to my eyes. It was everything I'd hoped for when I first moved to Brooklyn, a place where people supported each other, where I could build something meaningful. The salon was packed from morning until evening, with appointments booked solid for weeks afterward. As for Karen's house, it eventually sold to a young family with 2 adorable kids. The mom booked a welcome to the neighborhood hair appointment her first week there. As I was highlighting her hair, she asked me if the neighborhood was always this friendly. "Not always," I told her, smiling as I wrapped another section of her hair in foil. "But we worked on it. For the first time since moving to Brooklyn, I stopped looking over my shoulder. I stopped expecting the worst from people. I learned that standing up for yourself doesn't always mean conflict. Sometimes it means building a community strong enough that no single person can tear it down." The neighborhood had transformed from a battleground into a home, and I had found my place within it. And every once in a while, when I'm feeling particularly petty, I send Karen a Phoenix Beauty promotional postcard, just to let her know we're thriving. The next morning, I woke up to find my phone blowing up with notifications. The video of Karen vandalizing my salon had gotten way more attention than I expected. Like, not just neighborhood attention. It had spread to local Brooklyn Facebook groups and even caught the eye of a small community news blog. I scrolled through dozens of supportive comments from complete strangers while drinking my morning coffee. The validation felt amazing after months of being gaslit and harassed. I was in the middle of responding to messages when my phone rang. It was Officer Martinez, the cop who delivered Karen's restraining order. "Ms. Charlotte, we've got a situation with your neighbor," he said, his voice all official and serious. "She's claiming the video was doctored and that you're framing her. We need you to come down to the station to make an official statement." My stomach dropped. Of course Karen wouldn't go down without a fight. I threw on some clothes and headed to the precinct, texting Kira to let her know what was happening. The police station was exactly what you'd expect. Fluorescent lighting, the smell of bad coffee, and uncomfortable plastic chairs. I waited for almost an hour before Officer Martinez finally called me back. The questioning was pretty straightforward. I showed them the original video files with the metadata intact, proving they hadn't been altered. I also brought printouts of all the previous incidents I'd documented. Officer Martinez seemed impressed with my organization, which made me feel slightly better about the whole situation. "We've got enough here to press charges for vandalism and harassment," he said, flipping through my folder. "But there's something else you should know." Apparently, Karen had violated her probation in multiple ways with this latest stunt. The restraining order violation alone was serious, but combined with property damage and the documented pattern of harassment, she was looking at potential legal consequences. Part of me felt guilty. I never wanted things to escalate this far, but another part remembered all those sleepless nights, the constant anxiety, and the damage she'd done to my business. When I left the station, I found Kira waiting for me outside. She'd brought me a latte and a muffin because she's literally the best friend ever. "So what's the verdict?" she asked as we walked back toward my place. "They're pressing charges," I said, still processing it myself, "and they're investigating whether she violated her probation terms." Kira didn't celebrate like I expected. Instead, she looked thoughtful. "You know this isn't over, right? Even if she faces consequences, she'll be back eventually, and she'll be even more mad." I hadn't thought that far ahead, but Kira was right. This cycle could just keep repeating. Karen harasses me, faces consequences, then comes back with an even bigger vendetta. Something had to change. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking thinking about what Kira said. Around 3 a.m., I had a crazy idea. I grabbed my phone and drafted an email to Karen's lawyer. I'd gotten his contact info from the court documents. I proposed a meeting, me, Karen, and our respective lawyers, to try to resolve this situation once and for all. No cops, no judges, just us trying to find a solution that would let us both move on with our lives. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it, then finally fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up to a response. Karen's lawyer seemed surprised but said his client was willing to meet. We scheduled it for Friday afternoon at a neutral location, a conference room at the local library. I immediately called my cousin Tyler, who's a lawyer, and begged him to come with me. He wasn't thrilled about giving up his Friday, but he agreed after I promised to do his hair for free for the next year. Friday came way too quickly. I was a nervous wreck, changing my outfit 3 times before settling on something that looked professional but not intimidating. Dark jeans and a simple blouse. Tyler met me outside the library, looking all official in his suit and carrying an actual briefcase. Remember, don't admit to anything, don't apologize, and let me do most of the talking, he advised as we walked in. Karen and her lawyer were already there when we arrived. She looked different than I expected, smaller somehow, with dark circles under her eyes and her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She didn't make eye contact when we sat down. Her lawyer started with a long speech about how Karen felt targeted and harassed by the neighborhood. Tyler countered with a mountain of evidence showing it was actually the other way around. They went back and forth for a while, throwing around legal terms I didn't fully understand. I started to wonder if this whole meeting was a mistake. Then, during a pause in the conversation, I decided to speak up. "Can I just ask something directly?" I said, looking at Karen for the first time. "Why me? What did I ever do to make you hate me so much?" The room went quiet. Karen's lawyer started to answer for her, but she cut him off. "You didn't do anything," she said quietly, still not looking at me. "Your apartment. It used to be my daughter's." That was not what I expected to hear. I knew someone had lived there before me, but I'd never connected the dots. "She moved to LA 3 years ago," Karen continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "She doesn't call, doesn't visit. The salon space was supposed to be her art studio. We renovated it together." Suddenly, a lot of things started making sense. The weird fixation on my salon, the intense reaction to changes I made to the apartment. I wasn't just a neighbor to her. I was living in a space filled with memories of her estranged daughter. "That doesn't excuse what you did," Tyler jumped in, always the lawyer. "Charlotte has suffered real damages here." Karen nodded, finally looking up. "I know. I got carried away, and then it just kept escalating." Her lawyer slid a document across the table. It was a settlement offer. Karen would pay for all damages to my property, cover lost business income based on my previous year's tax returns, and agree to sell her house and move away from the neighborhood within 60 days. In exchange, I would drop all charges and agree not to pursue civil action. Tyler and I stepped outside to discuss it privately. The hallway was quiet except for the distant sounds of someone shelving books. "This is actually a pretty good deal," Tyler said, reviewing the paperwork. "The financial compensation is fair, and her leaving the neighborhood permanently solves the long-term problem." I wasn't thinking about the money. I was thinking about the look on Karen's face when she talked about her daughter. "Do you think she's being sincere about moving?" Tyler shrugged. "The agreement makes it legally binding. If she doesn't sell within 60 days, the financial penalties kick in." We went back inside and accepted the offer with a few minor adjustments. Karen would have to issue a public apology to the neighborhood for her behavior, and we added specific language about her not contacting me through any means, including social media or third parties. Everyone signed, and just like that, it was over. No more court dates, no more police reports, just a legal agreement that would hopefully let us all move on. As we were leaving, Karen stopped me in the hallway. Her lawyer and Tyler were ahead of us, discussing some final details. "I am sorry," she said, and for once she sounded genuine. "I took out my issues on you, and that wasn't fair." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her off for all the stress she'd caused, but another part recognized the pain behind her actions. In the end, I just nodded and kept walking. Some relationships can't be fixed, and that's okay. True to her word, Karen listed her house the following week. She even hired professional stagers and priced it competitively. I guess she was serious about leaving. The for sale sign on her lawn felt like a promise of peace to come. While all this was happening, Kira and I were moving forward with our plans to expand the salon. We used part of the settlement money to renovate properly. New flooring, better lighting, and actual salon chairs instead of the dining room furniture I'd been using. We got all the proper permits and licenses, making everything official. The neighborhood really rallied around us during the renovation. Marvin helped us paint the walls. A local carpenter built us custom shelving for products. Even my landlord was supportive, officially changing my lease to allow for commercial use after I showed him all the proper paperwork and insurance. Karen's house sold faster than anyone expected, just 3 weeks after listing. The new owners were a young couple with a toddler and another baby on the way. They seemed nice, if a bit overwhelmed by the moving process. I brought them welcome cookies the day they moved in, not overdone this time, and they were genuinely appreciative. The day before Karen was scheduled to move out, I was surprised to find an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a handwritten note and a small key. "This was my daughter's. It opens the built-in cabinet in the hallway. There's a hidden compartment inside with some of her old art supplies. I thought you might be able to use them in your salon. K." I found the hidden compartment that evening, a small drawer built into the back of the cabinet that I'd never noticed before. Inside were high-quality paintbrushes, specialized tools for detailed work, and a set of professional acrylic paints, perfect for the nail art section of our expanded salon. Karen left without saying goodbye to anyone. I watched from my window as the moving truck pulled away, feeling a complicated mix of relief and something like sympathy. According to Marvin, she was moving to Arizona to be closer to her sister. The grand reopening of Phoenix Beauty, Kira came up with a name, cheesy but fitting, was scheduled for the first weekend in October. We sent invitations to everyone in the neighborhood, ordered way too much food and champagne, and even hired a local photographer to document the event. The turnout was incredible. People I'd barely spoken to before showed up with gifts and well wishes. The new family from Karen's old house brought homemade cupcakes. Marvin gave a surprisingly emotional toast about community and second chances that had me tearing up. By the end of the day, our appointment book was filled for the next 3 weeks. As the last guests were leaving, Kira pulled me aside. "So, was it worth it?" she asked, gesturing around at our new salon. All the drama with Karen, I mean. I thought about it for a moment. The past few months had been some of the most stressful of my life. I'd been harassed, vandalized, and pushed to my breaking point. But I'd also found my voice, built a real business, and connected with a community in a way I never had in Manhattan. "Yeah," I said finally. "I think it was." That night, I slept better than I had in months. No checking the security cameras, no jumping at every sound, just peaceful, uninterrupted sleep. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of children laughing outside. The new family's toddler was chasing Bubbles in the front yard, her little legs moving as fast as they could while her parents watched from the porch. It was such a normal, happy scene, exactly what a neighborhood should be. I made myself coffee and sat by the window, watching the neighborhood come alive. People walking dogs, picking up mail, chatting with neighbors. No drama, no tension, just everyday life happening exactly as it should. And for the first time since moving to Brooklyn, I felt like I was exactly where I belong.